So in Chapter 8, Lesson 1, we talked about how we had this new normalcy that we were going to be looking at in the presidencies of Calvin Coolidge and Warren G. Harding. And I want to talk about what that looks like in more detail, because I know we had mentioned things like supply side economics, but we didn't actually kind of talk about what that looked like in the real cultural identity of America as more and more people started going to work, and how America changes because of this push in the 1920s for supply side economics. So I want to start by saying that the way in which we work as Americans actually undergoes a pretty significant change, believe it or not, when it comes to our cultural identity. We're going to see Americans working shorter days, shorter weeks, and being paid more even as prices fall. In the 1920s, as Americans are actually engaging in this kind of industrial work after World War I, this is actually the beginning of kind of a widespread middle class that we're all used to as Americans today. And the reason that happens is actually due to what we consider a revolution in mass production. Now, we discussed mass production way back in Chapter 3. We said that when a company is able to reach an economy of scale, it's able to produce so many goods at such a small price that it can become a really large corporation. But mass production in the 1920s, 19-teens, 1920s, actually looks a little bit different thanks to one of the inventions made by Henry Ford, which is the assembly line. Now, understand this. The assembly line has certainly been used before, but in the assembly line, it used to be different. You used to have a thing that would sit, and people would do work on that thing, and the people would move from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, down the line. That actually took up more time than was needed. It wasn't as efficient. So Henry Ford switches that concept, and instead, he takes the thing and he moves the thing down the line. And the worker just stays there. So now we have workers who are responsible for just one or two things as the car moves by the person. The person never has to move. Totally can cut down the amount of time needed to produce a car, because the only thing that holds people back, besides funny-looking moose antlers when making a car now for Henry Ford, is how fast you can do that one thing before the car moves past you. Henry Ford's focus is on making sure all unnecessary movement is at a very, very minimum. Everything is timed. And he begins to experiment with this concept. He says, okay, we're gonna time your bathroom breaks. We're gonna time the distance between the assembly line and the bathroom. We're gonna time how long it takes for you to get from the assembly line to your lunch line, from the lunch line back to the assembly line. How long does it take you to pick up your tools and do your work and put your tools down again? Everything is on the clock. It's all timed to a science, so that he can produce as many of his cars as possible. And he does this again and again and again. He's got a lot of different cars: Model A, Model B, Model C, Model D, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. But it's not until he gets to the Model T, also known as the Tin Lizzie or Flivver, that he's actually able to produce a car incredibly efficiently so that the price drops. So that by 1925, one of these cars is being made every 10 seconds. So I've been talking now for 3 minutes and 55 seconds. That's a lot of cars that have come off the line. 20 plus cars have already come off the line. Now it's 4 minutes. You know, what is that? That's 6 times 4. That's 24 cars have already been produced. Higher the supply of cars that Henry Ford can make, for example, the lower the price, which means Ford will sell far more. Now, I know that here it says that he sells far more and he can raise his workers' pay, and that's definitely part of it. But that's not actually why Henry Ford raises his workers' pay. He actually dramatically increases their wage. Let's say let's say that the people who were working for Chevrolet could have got $2.25. At Henry Ford's plant, you got $5 an hour. The reason Henry Ford did that was that he actually discovered that if he paid his people too little, they had no incentive to stay and work for him. So they would quit and just walk off and go find a new job, which would totally stop the production line, slow down his assembly line, make it less efficient, keep himself from making more cars, kept the price from falling. Henry Ford realized by giving people $5 an hour, which was way over minimum wage. It wasn't even a minimum wage. It was way over what anyone else was paying. By giving him $5 an hour, people would stay with him. They would learn their job, and they wouldn't quit. Now, they actually had a whole series of things they had to do to keep their job. They had to learn English, so if you were an immigrant, you were forced to learn English. Your home could be inspected by Henry Ford's people to make sure you were living a healthy and clean and productive lifestyle. You had to act the way he wanted you to act. You couldn't drink, for example, so that you would show up to work, you would be sober. He had a high standard for his employees, and if you didn't meet it, out the door you went. So that $5 an hour came with some pretty big strings attached to it, but it did allow him to keep workers really for a really long time and make them productive. Just give you one last example before we move on. Henry Ford, at one point, before 1920, hired 52,000 people in 1 year, but he only needed 14,000 to actually work his assembly line. That's how many people would start the job, quit, walk off the job. That's a lot of new people to train. By making that wage $5 an hour, by making people stay sober, by making people stay healthy living, by keeping them working for him, by giving them that $5 an hour, he cut down that turnover dramatically. End result, work week shortens, work day shortens, higher pay, prices of goods are going to fall, and especially when it comes to things like the car and other groundbreaking and game-changing technologies.